Oh, hi there. You're listening to Unnatural Selection, the show about newsy type stuff and things. My name is George.
My name is Tom.
And my name is Adam.
And with our powers combined, we are Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com. Back for another week.
Back for another week.
And I apologize in advance if you hear any loud planes or noises in the background of this. It is hot as balls in Sydney tonight, so I have to have the window open or I will die.
Okay, so if there's any random planes or lightning storms or any other kind of force majeure acts of God, and Tom is forced to drop out due to sudden flash flooding, then that's why he's suddenly disappeared.
I don't know. At least he's not dressing up like a bear, which we'll talk about later. But anyway, that's in the industry, kids. That's called a tease. First story: Donald Trump, his choice for U.S. Attorney General Matt Gaetz, has withdrawn himself from consideration. Now, it emerged that there were questions about his many allegations of sexual misconduct. Things like his
being investigated by an ethics committee,
being investigated by the Justice Department, and that he would seek to control, and the ethics committee, the House Ethics Committee, as well as just spreadsheets out there of his Venmo transactions from $300 to sort of $700 for reimbursements to random women who are definitely sex workers. So, and there was also some stories that emerged this week of him having shown videos of a sexual nature on the floor of the house, to other to workmates, being look how I use my phone, look how I fuck this chick, bro. He's just every office has a guy who's the worst guy. You know what I mean? Where they're just...
I thought you meant there was every office has a guy who shows you videos of people he's fucked.
Well,
and I was I don't think I've ever worked in a workplace where that's happened.
It could be that guy. There's definitely the guy who talks about going to Thailand and you don't think it's for the massages. You know what I mean? It was just you are definitely a sex criminal. You are 100% going there for sex tourism because you're a piece of shit. And Matt Gaetz is that guy. But in the interests of quote, avoiding a needlessly protracted Washington scuffle, unquote. He decided to withdraw his own nomination. Now, it did emerge that at least 4 Republican senators said they would not vote for him under any circumstances. So it wasn't so much a withdrawal as it was a tactical retreat, I think.
We're cooperating with the inquiry and I'm resigning.
I welcome the inquiry. I resigned from a great height with my back filled with bullets.
I'd like to cooperate with the inquiry. I have cooperated with the inquiry. I'm stepping down. Please, dear God, do not release the results of the inquiry. I beg you.
Yeah, and Mike, what's his name? The guy who watches that app that has that app where he watches his son beat off.
His son's
what's
his son monitors his...
No, not Mike Huckabee. No, that is Mike Huckabee is a member of... So, unrelated note.
Mike Johnson? I want to say
Johnson.
He had a really boring, generic man name.
You're right. It's just white man. Yeah, Bob Whiteman. So basically, Mike
Johnson
came around and said he's not a member of the House anymore, so there's no need for us to release the House ethics investigation, despite the fact that there's a number of different precedents where you would
that's been done. Interested in that.
Yeah.
That sounds like some sort of quid pro pro situation going, I'll withdraw if you don't release the finding. Quid pro pro.
Yeah. He gets a quid if you don't release the information about all the pros I've had sex with. So he has neglected to release that report, but obviously there's Democrats on that committee, so I imagine we'll see the detail of that report, and substantive stuff has been leaking out this week, sort of against Gaetz. So I still want to see it. Just because someone resigned doesn't mean they're not a sex criminal. That information should be available. The fact that Trump, the president-elect, nominated this guy who he would have seen this in the vetting information to be his attorney general is useful information for the public to know when thinking about Trump as a leader, right?
So instead, now they have nominated
Pam Bondi.
Former Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi.
Who I can confirm is a person, and that's all I know about Pam Bondi.
Yeah. My wife was saying the other day, that is the most, to us in Australia, that is the most made up name you could possibly. That sounds like the kind of name that I would describe your average Sydney beach goer. Oh, there's Pam Bondi just wandering around with her huge boyfriend and tiny dog.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the name of Pamela Anderson's character in Baywatch, right? Pam Bondi.
Part of Trump's defense team in his impeachment trial in the Senate in 2020 and campaigned for him before this year's election. So she's a Donald Trump supporter.
Toady. Yeah. No, so what it shows, as far as I can tell, what this incident shows is that, there are some people that are so morally repugnant that even Republican senators cannot hold their nose and vote for them, which says a lot because they did that for Donald Trump. But so even people so repugnant that even Republicans cannot vote for them. However, what I'm concerned about is that this Pam Bondi person is obviously a toady of Trump's, right? That's why she's there. What he's trying to do is he's trying to load up all of these departments, and not just heads of the departments, but down to more functionary level roles. He's trying to load them up with his toadies, with his apparatchiks, right?
With yes people, just...
Yeah. I want my fucking weird freaks in there, so when the shit goes down, you'll do exactly what I say. To appoint your own, someone who's been your personal lawyer into an administration where they're the chief law officer of the land is just bizarre, cooked, corrupt behavior. A normal administration wouldn't want to do that just for here we are, norms, and we're back to norms again. But they would avoid doing this just for the appearance of corruption. But Trump's no, that's exactly what I'm after. I'm after the corrupt people that will do whatever I say regardless. And the thing I worry about is Pam Bondi is probably just as much of an extremist, but she's not a sex criminal. And so we'll just okay, that's better. And we'll just forget about it. And then she'll be the Attorney General of the United States.
It's better, but...
Yeah, it's still the same.
It's got some experience.
It's still the same turd sandwich. It's just in a nicer wrapping. I guess she's been an Attorney General before. Okay, fine, whatever. She's less hilariously unqualified than Matt Gaetz was. But as in terms of what she'll do with the power that she's given, I'm no more reassured to have her in place than Matt Gaetz. Yeah. Right. So.
Is there a piece of, correct me if I'm wrong, is there a piece of schadenfreude in this where Matt had already resigned from the House as
delicious.
well?
It's fantastic. He's now...
What happened?
So he resigned from the House, but he's resigned from this term of Congress. So he's already been reelected in his seat. So he could come back starting next year in the next term of Congress.
So he could come back starting Jan 20th.
Exactly. Yeah. So he's I'm resigned the job that I have now, which goes from now until Jan 20, but then I still get the job back Jan 20 next year if I want it. Now he's still going to have to deal with the House ethics investigation and all that kind of shit anyway. Then so who knows what he's going to do about that? But so
it's got a 6-week holiday. Actually, is sort of what happens there.
Yeah, paid. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, why not?
A thing that came out of this that I thought was rather interesting and it was funny because I first came across it via satire rather than the actual news. And the satire piece...
Who says our media environment's not fragmented?
Right. But the satire piece, I forget who published it. It wasn't The Onion. It was a different one. But said that Marjorie Taylor Greene says that if we kicked out every person who had sex crime allegations against them, the Democrats would have a supermajority.
Yeah.
I was like, haha, that's funny. Did she actually say that? Found out this was a satire news place. And then found the actual story, which was that she said, if you are calling to release Gaetz's stuff, release what we have on everyone. Open table, put it all out on the table, and we should release everything into everyone. Let's go. And I was like, yeah, I find your terms acceptable, Marjorie.
That is a surprisingly woke take. But believe it or not, Marjorie, I don't want any sex criminals in politics, regardless of which side they're on.
Yeah, so I was like, yeah, Marjorie, let's do that.
Yeah,
I couldn't believe I was hearing it from her. It was like, worst person you know made a good point. I was like,
even a broken clock is right 5 times a day. So
Yeah, absolutely crazy. And also, I did feel, just for a split second, I did feel a little sorry for Matt Gaetz. Because, like, even though horrendous piece of shit, and this is exactly what he deserves, but for a moment there, I just imagined, separate from everything else, could you imagine it publicly being known that you've been put forward for a promotion, and the entire world screamed, "What the fuck are you doing?" I just imagine there's a moment where you look in the mirror just of a morning, and you remember who you are. Yeah. And that's just...
Well, Tom,
no, it is the children who are wrong, Tom.
This soul-crushing just moment of like, wow, I am that hated. And I imagine he's so craven, he probably then just like takes a deep breath, does that creepy smile of his, and just then goes about his day. But I reckon there was a moment there where he was just at the bottom of the deepest pit of sadness.
Well, no, because when Matt Gaetz looks in the mirror, he doesn't see anything because he doesn't have a reflection because he's a vampire.
Very true. Yep,
so there is something to that, though, because in his tweet he said, quote, "I had excellent meetings with senators yesterday. I appreciate their thoughtful feedback and the incredible support of so many. While the momentum was strong, it's clear that my confirmation was unfairly becoming a distraction for the critical work of the Trump Vance transition. There is no time to waste on a needlessly protracted Washington scuffle. Thus, I'll be withdrawing my name from consideration to serve as AG. Trump's DOJ must be in place and ready on day one. I remain fully committed to see that Donald J. Trump is the most successful president in history. I will forever be honored that President Trump nominated me to lead the Department of Justice, and I'm certain he will save America." Save has got a capital S for no reason. So he's basically saying, like, I could have done it, but like I didn't want to. Like
I'm
absolutely,
gonna be a good guy.
Yeah,
and drop out.
Yeah. I'm just
like,
because
I'm do the baller thing.
You know, it's because I'm slaying too hard. You know, that's why.
Put it on his LinkedIn.
Almost AG. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe nearly AG that one time, except for the alleged sex crimes. 2024.
It's a very sex crimey cabinet, I have to say. RFK Jr. has allegations of sex crimes against him from a babysitter that was in his employ some years ago, and he didn't deny it. He was on an interview where someone asked him about it, and and he basically said, "I told you I had a lot of skeletons in my closet." And they're like, "Is that a yes? Does that mean you did this?"
Yeah, he did something like, "Yeah, of course. I told you across this campaign, a lot of like, all the skeletons are going to come out of the closet." Like,
So that's not a no.
RFK, man.
And there's obviously those questions around the defense secretary, Pete Hegseth, has allegations of sexual assault against him, which I believe he paid the woman off, and she signed an NDA, so she can't talk about it. It's like a real sex crimey cabinet. I think Donald Trump really wants that locker room talk.
Sounds like a Donald Trump cabinet.
Yeah. It's bad. It's
bad.
It's bad for all the reasons you would think that it would be bad, but it's also bad for so many other reasons as well. It's like they're bad people doing terrible things because they are either like badly informed or deliberately ignorant or bad, terrible, inept people. And many of them are also sex criminals. It's like if we had to roll, like we are definitely
alleged sex criminals.
Okay, come after me then, Pete. Whatever. Okay, there's 27, last I checked, allegations of credible sexual assault against Donald Trump. He was found liable for rape in a civil trial for which he is to pay E.G. and Carroll something like $80 million. Like, I don't think it's too much at this point. I actually don't think you need to sprinkle an allegedly on it when RFK says like, well, we all make mistakes. Like, I don't think I need to then do the heavy lifting of sprinkling and allegedly on it. Like, I think we're in the clear.
It is interesting that the party that's like obsessed with the virtue of innocence.
Oh, and all the bullshit
that's like
all the bullshit
daddy's home
about the pedophilia and sex trafficking, and the Dems are all fucking rapists that come here to get your kids. But all the Pizzagate conspiracy, QAnon horseshit. And who do they elect who do they put in their cabinet? Literal fucking sex criminals. Like Gaetz, is alleged to have had sex with a 17-year-old. He has been witnessed. There are multiple people that can attest to this, that he had sex with a minor. like that he has paid for sex and drugs and abused his campaign funds. And then, you know, like for these same people to be like, you know, when Bill Clinton gets a consensual blowy in the Oval Office being like, character matters. And then next minute, they're just like, let's vote for the fucking, let's vote for the Pizzagate cabinet. Like, let's do it.
I think the Monica Lewinsky situation was a bit more nuanced than that, but yes, point taken.
I don't like, it wasn't good. Like obviously
the power and things like consensual is arguable. I think
there is obviously a massive power. I don't care. I'm not talking about Bill Clinton. We're done with that.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's what I mean. Like, I just want that out there. But
you're just holding a knife in one hand.
I need something to fidget with because I'm gonna start. I'm gonna start cutting.
All right. I'm going to text Grace and be like, you need to get a new fidget toy. That's your Christmas present. I'm buying you I'm going to buy you a
I got the fidget spinner. I got the fidget spinner instead.
If you need to fidget with something, please put the knife down.
Okay. I'm going to, I just really feel like I could cut a bitch right now. So speaking of bitches, Jair Bolsonaro has been indicted over an alleged coup plot because he's a little basic bitch and he's little sissy. No, I'm not going to say that's not very nice. I hate Jair Bolsonaro and he's a prick. So this, so you may know that Jair Bolsonaro attempted to launch a coup in 2022 to stay in office following his re-election defeat. So he was elected in 2018 with like a 55% majority, and in 2022 he was up for re-election again, lost against Lula da Silva, and it was like 59-40, you know. 51-49 kind of thing. Like it was a swing of about, and it went to a runoff election. It was a pretty close election, but like a 6-point swing against an incumbent who like did a bunch of terrible shit during his administration. One of those things being like horrendously mishandling COVID. It's not that unusual. Anyway, so he decided to do a coup and have Lula assassinated. This is what these documents allege. And basically use that as a pretext for suspending the government and saying, actually, you know how someone, don't know who, murdered the president. Maybe I'll just be the president now for an indeterminate amount of time. That's how that works, right?
Sure, why not?
So there was a Senate report that came out that said, hey, he did a bunch of cook shit. That's then gone to the police, who have put together this like 900-page report. They've indicted former President Jair Bolsonaro, as well as 36 other people as part of a pretty large criminal conspiracy that worked to keep him in power. So
and that includes like a number of members of the military, aides,
members of the military, and as notable actually because like he's been noted for being like pretty accepting of the and like even going so far as to praise the former right-wing military junta who was in power in Brazil in years past, and including some of those people in his administration in like official capacities. Like, yeah, pretty dirtbag stuff. Anyway, all of this is which is to say, so there were several years ago, I worked at a company, and there was this guy, Luke. And Luke was the office like conservative sort of shitbag.
Not his real name?
No, it is his real name. I'm not going to tell you his last name. Plenty of Lukes. Go fuck yourself, Luke. And he would listen to the show, I guess, and we'd get stuck into it about politics. And Luke, I remember we said something about Bolsonaro being a cunt in 2018. And you know what? I've never been more right about anything in my life. If anything, like the events of this week have just like really borne out. I asked ChatGPT to put together a list of the shitty things that Bolsonaro has done, and I fact-checked all of these, so I know they're all legit.
You fact-checked all of these, so you looked them all up yourself, so you didn't need to like burn a portion of the rainforest to ask ChatGPT to do it for you?
To burn a portion of the Amazonian rainforest in Brazil, ironically, to do it. No, probably not. But so there's a number of different shitty things that he did during his term. Obviously, the shittiest of which being, you know, the attempt to try and kill
the coup.
The coup. But yeah, obviously deforestation in the Amazon, you know, really cracked down on indigenous rights. His pandemic response was roundly panned. Promotion of unproven treatments like hydroxychloroquine, diverting attention from effective public health measures, lack of support for public health during the pandemic. It was widely thought that Brazil would have been in a really good position to combat the COVID-19 pandemic because they've got a history of running really effective like immunization campaigns, and they neglected to do that. And then, undermining democratic institutions, questioning the legitimacy of the electoral system without evidence, support for military rule, social policies and human rights, like being homophobic and misogynistic. So for instance, he once stated he would rather have a dead son than a gay son, advocating murder of his opponents, weakening protections for marginalized groups like LGBT women and Afro-Brazilian populations, attacks on press freedom.
It's a laundry list of shit.
Yeah, and then obviously pro-Trump alignment and diplomatic isolation with key partners and things like that. So he's done a lot of shitty things. And Luke would just say to me like, oh, how do you know that he's not just like, how do you know he's not just like a well-intentioned guy that just wants the best for Brazil? Like, it's like unprofessional of you guys to call him a cunt on your radio show. Like, it's just not. So first of all, it's not a radio show. Second of all, it's a podcast. Get hip to the 21st century, Luke. And you know what?
Third of all, we're not paid, so we're not professionals.
Yeah, not a decidedly unprofessional. So the idea that we should be, it's a comedy podcast. Okay, first of all.
Yeah.
And second of all, you know what, Luke? I was right. The guy is an absolute prick. Okay, he is the worst of the worst, and I deserve an apology. So Luke, if you're listening, I'll take my apology in written or audiogram form. Thank you very much.
For reference, in the pandemic, 702,116 people died of COVID in Brazil.
Yeah, way more than needed to die.
The peak pandemic period. I mean, that's what Wikipedia says. I'm sure there's other stats around on those numbers, but still.
He sucks, man. He really sucks. And
it was one of those things. Like, it was around the time, like, Brexit happened,
Yeah.
Trump happened,
Yeah.
Bolsonaro happened, all within like a 3-year period.
Yeah.
And it was, and now we've got Trump again.
The thing is, like, it was all very predictable, like him trying to overturn the election. He even, like, there's, they've got resources here that I'll link to in the show notes that we're talking about what's Bolsonaro going to do. He's already laying the groundwork before the election even happened, saying that it was stolen, you couldn't trust the voting machines and all this sort of stuff. And then, like, sure enough, like exactly like Trump, if you like lay the seeds of that down for months and months and poison the well of your information environment for your, for your country, like, it's inevitable that you're going to have violence and terrible things come. Like, he was explicitly calling for, people to come out into the streets and be violent. Like, it's not, and this was all like, ascertainable prior to the coup attempt as well.
Yeah.
He was saying he was going to do it, and then he did it, and then he got caught, and he's like, what do you mean? And he even went to like Florida. He was in Florida when it happened, when it all went down. Like, the guy didn't even want to be like in the country when the shit went down.
He was out of the country when people were trying to like keep him.
Yeah.
Yeah, very strange thing to do.
Yeah, well, I think he thought he was going to get, like,
I guess
arrested or something, maybe have
I
something.
was like, they're not with me. I'm not there. So how can they be with me?
How can I
Like,
possibly direct a coup from, Mar-a-Lago?
Was he in Mar-a-Lago?
Oh, he was in Florida, so.
Right, okay. Well,
but I think there
speaking
were
of-
reports at the time that he was hanging out with Trump. Like, like, not ironically, so.
they sound like peas in a pod.
Yeah. Dipshit peas in a shit bag pod.
Yeah. Speaking of shitbag pods, Adani, an arrest warrant has been issued by American authorities for Gautam Adani, who's the Indian billionaire who runs coal mines and things around the world. Here in Australia, there's the Carmichael coal mine that's been a big point of contention. You see Stop Adani protest like stuff everywhere. This is the Adani that they are talking about.
Yes.
So on allegations of bribery, trying to pay, plotting to pay bribes to Indian officials. Not great. It's a real dicey stuff.
So a New York judge has... Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, it's just interesting that the charges come from New York. Continue.
Yeah, no, so that's basically what I was going to touch on. So a New York judge has issued the warrant for Mr. Adani's arrest, and the reason is because there are laws on the books in the United States that relate to fraud. So quote, American authorities accuse the Adani Group chairman, his nephew Sagar Adani, and 6 associates of plotting to pay bribes to Indian government officials of more than $265 million. They said this has taken place, quote, at the expense of US investors. So because they've got business interests in the United States, they have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders. They say, well, you can't do illegal shit with that money that you're supposed to be returning to the shareholders. Meanwhile, he's like, like in all fairness, this is India. This is how we get large scale corrupt, business plans done as we pay off government officials. That's how things work here. And they said, we'll take that and we'll raise you one arrest warrant. Go fuck yourself.
Yeah, do they also say, that's how things work here as well? But you can't do it. You can't do that.
You got to be smarter about it.
You can bribe our officials. You can't bribe.
As long as it goes through a super PAC, then it's fine.
Yeah, it's all like, no. Yeah, you give money to their campaigns, but not their campaigns. You just give it to a large group of people, like people who are collecting money just to spruik a campaign, but they're not the campaign. That's how you do it. You can't just hand over Hessian sacks with dollar signs on it. Guys, this is bribery 101.
This is, to be clear, not the first time there have been questions around Adani's ethics and business transactions. He is perhaps, well, if not the most, he's one of the most influential and rich people in India, directly or indirectly employing lots of people. But in doing so, he has, in sort of creating his business empire, there are serious questions around how he has achieved that success.
It's dodgy, and as you say, this is not news to anyone who's around for the Stop Adani protests in whatever it was, several years ago.
A while ago,
would know about it. So for those Australian listeners of ours, I have dug up a Four Corners report called "Digging into Adani," which talks about all of the shonky, dodgy practices that were discovered around their attempts to get that coal mine that you mentioned before, Tom, set up. The Carmichael coal mine. Yeah. So there's a lot of really dodgy stuff going on. So if you're in Australia, it's on iView. You can watch it now. I'll include that link in the show notes. Again, it's called Digging into Adani, 46-minute expose on all of the shonky madness that has taken place at the behest of this man and has been going on for years. So wholly unsurprised that he's been indicted.
And here's the question. Would he ever get extradited?
No.
No.
Hell no.
No, you see, Adam, he's a billionaire and the rules don't count for billionaires. But, if he did what was that guy from Signal, Pavel? What was his name? He accidentally...
the guy from Russia who was ended up in France. He's like,
he was in France. He was just hanging out in the south of France and they're like, we're going to arrest you? Why'd you come here? Maybe one of those scenarios if he's hanging out in his villa in the south of France, and someone just an Interpol cop just stumbles over him, maybe he'll get arrested. Who knows?
Yeah. Now, a part of this story about Adani that I just rather like is, as we alluded to before, of saying,
he sucks.
Hey,
he sucks. Jair Bolsonaro sucks. Matt Gaetz suck. All these guys suck.
Yeah, but that, the bribery is just like, you can't just do these bribes so obviously. And some details to read here was that that Adani's son, Sagar Adani, is alleged to have used his mobile phone to track the specifics of the bribes, just keeping up to date how those bribes going, fellas. In a lot of the text messages.
Hey,
and
fellas,
like that.
just getting ready for our morning stand up. How are we doing on those bribes?
Well, and this sentence
I've started a whip document. It's a work in progress, and just says bribes ? And what I want you guys to do is just go to the Excel spreadsheet and really document all your crimes. Just really thoroughly make sure they're on a cloud server and everyone's got access to them because it's a new information radiator approach. It's called Agile, right? So I want to make sure everyone's on the same page and working off the same information. So if we could just get all of the crimes documented in one place, that'd be ideal. So
it's the only way to track reimbursements.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this statement here that I rather like, which is that according to court documents, some of the defendants referred privately to Gautam Adani with the code names Numero Uno and The Big Man. It's like, good. Good code names, fellas. Wonder who you're talking about there.
Additional
Santa
code
Claus.
names.
Santa Claus.
Additional code names include El Jefe and the Big Cheese. So it's yet investigators still do not know to whom they are referring.
So geez, there's no craft in corruption anymore.
You know
where's
what?
the craft?
It used to be, people used to take a bit more pride in their work, and now it's all chat GPT and getting things, instantaneously. There used to be a bit of like artisanal, you used to have to work for your corruption. Nowadays, you just, shoot off a text saying you've done some bribes. It's just the heart's gone. Used to be about the music,
Yeah, speaking of taking pride in your work, I'd imagine Senator Penny Wong's pride is pretty shaken this week following that the International Criminal Court has issued arrest warrants for Benjamin Netanyahu and his former defense minister and a senior Hamas official. As kind of a big landmark bullet point of the conflict going on in Gaza at the moment. So I looked it up, actually. We were talking about this before the show when we were going down the rundown, is that we thought there was maybe a ruling of the ICJ earlier this year.
Yeah, I thought there was some other information about that.
I found it out.
Yeah,
back
what was
in May, a prosecutor had lodged to the ICC that they wanted arrest warrants issued. So what happened this week is it's happened.
They got it.
So it took, hang on, how many months did it take him to work out whether to charge him?
6 months?
6 months.
Yeah, 6 months, whether or not the the genocide is a war crime.
It's a pretty quick turnaround on an alleged genocide.
Man. I don't know what to say.
I'm just imagining that math gif where the woman's like doing sums in her head and all just like things are just flying past her. I was like, what could you be thinking about for 6 months as to it? Just turn on the television, look at the kids covered in soot from the explosions that just went off in their playground, and you'll have the evidence that you need, I think.
Yeah, people are like being denied like supplies and being starved out. But is it starving as an act of war? Is it intentional starving? I don't know.
We're getting cases of polio for the first time in the better part of a century. But is that like all's fair in love and war? Like, what is war really? Like, let's spend another 3 months on it, I think.
So I guess a big part of this is that that the ICC, like, their arrest warrants not just for like significant members of the Israeli government, but also this senior member of Hamas. So they're both sidesing it a little bit there, kind of being like, you've all killed people illegally, bad. So it makes sense.
If you can't play with the fire truck, nobody gets the fire truck. The fire truck being, of course, the Gaza Strip.
Yes, the quote from the ICC is that that they believe there were reasonable grounds to believe that Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant, who's the former defense minister, quote, bear responsibility for the crime of starvation as a method of warfare and the crimes against humanity of murder, persecution, and other inhumane acts. So the reason I bring up Penny Wong before is that on this same day, she tweeted something that was the biggest nothing burger I think I've ever read. So she tweeted this, which said, Australia respects the independence of the ICC and its important role in upholding international law. Australia is focused on working with countries that want peace to press for an urgently needed ceasefire. Okay. And then there were further comments in the solemn JPEG that she posted. I can't take credit for solemn JPEG. That's
How solemn was the JPEG though? Was it appropriately?
I can explain later.
Okay, very good.
But that Australia respects the independence, blah, blah, blah. We have been clear that all parties to the conflict must comply with international humanitarian law. Civilians must be protected. Hostages must be released. Rapid, safe, and unimpeded humanitarian relief must reach civilians. Aid workers must be protected to enable their life-saving work. You will notice. Never said Israel. Never said who even arrest warrants being issued, or what conflict she was even fucking talking about. So I don't know. I replied to this tweet myself. God, I hope she sees me, bro. But replied to this myself, being like, you just wake up this morning and decide to say, God, the ICC's good and I respect them. Or did something happen, Penny?
Yeah, what happened?
Did something specifically happen?
To what are you responding?
Yeah, to what the fuck does that mean? And everyone's dug up tweets from like 5 years ago when I think Trump was criticizing the ICC. I believe they were trying to maybe investigate US allegations of war crimes.
Yeah, the US government doesn't recognize the ICC, neither does Israel for that matter. So.
Yeah, and that the US was saying like, we need to sanction these people. And Penny Wong said like, hey, the ICC is extremely important in holding people to account when they commit things like war crimes and genocides. Like, you know, they must be protected and respected and their rulings like upheld. And everyone's like, Penny, you doing over there?
How's that tweet aged?
Oh my!
I remember
God. Like,
there was
such a nothing burger.
There was a response.
She's terrible.
There was a response from a Trump department official at the time. I don't remember the exact wording, but it was something like, "Oh, the ICC doesn't apply to us. That's like for African countries. Like, that's for like the shithole countries, sort of thing. That doesn't apply to us. Like, what are you talking about? That's crazy."
And I think this is just a bit wild in that, so the ICC, I don't think it doesn't. From my understanding, it doesn't compel Australia and other countries to do anything. Like, it's now not like mandatory that Netanyahu be arrested if he like arrived in Australia, for example. But given past like stressing of the importance of this body and its work and all those sorts of things, it looks kind of bad politically if you don't at this sort of stage. Like,
so in theory, if Netanyahu goes to any of the countries that are signatories to the ICC, then they, like, in theory,
they should probably acknowledge the arrest warrant and arrest the person the warrant.
That is something that they are supposed to do. Now, as to whether they would actually do that, no, they won't.
But it's kind of, it looks bad if they don't, or at least don't say that they would, were it to happen. I think Italy, for example, has said that they would.
Okay, well, if they can wake up from their siesta in time, then maybe they'll get around to it.
I think so it's one of those of, no, like, this doesn't mean that we're suddenly going to get footage of Netanyahu being like dragged off in chains.
Well, that's what AI is for. That's what AI is for, Tom. You can live your most closely held fantasies. You know, you can. They've got AI girlfriends. They can get Netanyahu getting dragged away in chains. Like,
even make you a gif of it.
Yeah. Yep. So it doesn't mean that that's necessarily what's going to be happening, but I still think this kind of like, when people have been brushing this off, it's like, well, this means nothing. But I think it does mean something. I think it's still it's a big win. For like, sort of, you've got on record that like one of the biggest, most like respected international law courts has called for his arrest, has acknowledging what's happening, and it then also just puts political pressure on governments like the Albanese government of like, hey, you're further wedged on this. You can't just keep like, I don't know, just pretending nothing's going on just to keep your sweet diplomatic ties to Israel. Hey guys, you got to actually fucking have a backbone.
Well, that and what's his name? Was it Josh Burns?
The Labour guy in McNamara.
He's also, he's got to keep his seat as well. So there's that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I used to live in in Elstonwick in Melbourne, and that was a big, big Jewish population there. So I wonder how Zionist the area was. I never encountered it myself, but I'd already moved by the time that shit kicked off. So,
well, if anyone ends up setting up a settlement in your living room, then you'll know for sure.
I mean, we live in Australia, like glass houses throwing stones when it comes to stealing people's land, colonialism.
I understand what you're saying. Australia does not have a resplendent, sparkling record when it comes to stealing people's land. I believe, as I recall, we arrived here. I say we, your people arrived here and basically stuck a flag in the ground and said terra nullius. No one was here. And they're like, what about those guys over there? They're like, don't worry about it. The coalition is also set to oppose Labor's contentious plan to cap international student enrolments from next year. So previously, the opposition, Peter Dutton, had gone on the record saying that they were in support of lowering the amount of migration to Australia, and that they were, I guess, in principle in support of Labor's policy to do so via reducing international student arrivals. But doing what the Liberal Party does, they've said, oh, this would actually benefit you and would help you out. So suck eggs, get fucked. We're not going to do it. And they formed an unholy alliance with the Greens in order to block the legislation from passing Parliament. So
it's the third right of something. I can't even think of the analogy, but it is kind of like a weird voodoo ritual that they did.
It's like a Rosemary's Baby. It's the third thing that happens, and then you bring about the birth of the Antichrist.
Yeah. Indeed.
So, I mean, it's completely unsurprising that Peter Dutton is trying to use this situation for his own political, sort of gamesmanship. They've gone and criticized. So the coalition's education spokesperson, Sarah Henderson, said the proposed cap in the education bill before Parliament will not even touch the sides of the problem. We cannot support measures which will only serve to compound this crisis of the government's making. But opposition leader Peter Dutton has previously said that his party would aim for a cap of 160,000 as opposed to the 260,000 that's being proposed in this bill.
Literally one of their policies.
They're basically campaigning on it. They're saying this policy is trash. It doesn't do anywhere near enough to help the problem, and we're not going to vote for it, but also vote for our plan, which is also different in ways that we have not yet quantified, but which will do the same thing. So, obviously he's knifing Labor because it's politically beneficial for them to do so. Quote, never in my life did I expect to see Peter Dutton in bed with the Greens over migration, said Education Minister Jason Clare. You can't talk tough on immigration and then go soft on this. So,
well, it's kind of cooked now because it now leaves the university sector in this weird fucking limbo. They've already because they'd started to implement it before the thing had fucking passed.
So there's two things. So there was the Ministerial Action 107, right? Which basically it was in order to address the so after COVID, after you know what I mean. Over the last couple of years, when the COVID crisis seemed less front of mind, international students started returning to Australian institutions in large numbers, and in many instances overtaking the amount of sort of pre-pandemic levels for a lot of these international student places. Right. The Labor Party at that stage said there's too many people coming in. The coalition has said something about lowering migration, and that's the reason that housing prices are too expensive. Never mind that housing prices have been too expensive in Australia for the last 30 fucking years in a row over consecutive governments. But that's
they're throwing it in with the
But what they're trying to do is they're trying to throw some red meat to their racist base and say, hey, look, we know you hate the Browns. We hate them too. Maybe they're the reason for the housing crisis. And everyone went, sure, that sounds good. And so what they've done is they've put together this plan to decrease. Now, we don't know what the details of the Liberals' plan are. As far as I'm aware, they haven't, sort of made that public, but I'm sure it's totally different. But essentially, Labor, in a sort of a race to the bottom, said, okay, that sounds great, and we'll do a race to the bottom and try and be even more conservative than you and say, we're going to solve the problem. So they introduced this Ministerial Direction 107, which requires immigration officials to prioritize applications for students with offers from institutions considered low risk. So it's not that they've changed the legislation, but the direction to the immigration officials as to how they do their jobs has changed, and it's going to prioritize. And the whole thing about, they made this claim that it was all about dodgy providers, cracking down on dodgy providers. And so if you're issuing...
They love cracking down on dodgy providers, don't they? In a lot of areas.
Why don't you just crack down on the dodgy providers? What they're saying now is we acknowledge that dodgy providers are in Australia. We know who they are. And we're just going to stop the amount of people coming into Australia in order to choke them off. It's like, well, why don't you stop them from doing what it is that they're doing that's dodgy, right? If there are all these dodgy providers out there. Anyway.
Makes sense to me.
So
that's Ministerial 107. That direction's been in place for some time.
Yes, I think it was December last year or something. Yeah. So it's been in place for a while, but it's not fit for purpose. Obviously, it doesn't address some of these broader structural things that they're wanting to change. So that's why they've proposed this piece of legislation, which is now seems like not going to make it. But
what I was going to say was that as part of the legislation that they were going to introduce, there was a indicative number that was given out to some of these institutions as to how many students they would get. And so they have tied their entire student program, marketing, everything, enrolments, whatever else around these indicative numbers that aren't worth shit now because the system isn't changing. Some universities apparently didn't do like they sort of put pause. They had some like a waiting list, like we'll see what happens kind of thing. They hadn't finalized their enrollments.
In case you're wondering, like this is not like universities are not agile like this, where they can just like change hundreds or thousands of student numbers in the case of like a couple of months. Like even Labor wanting to implement this piece of policy this late in the year, knowing that students are going to be starting like January of next year is still already too late in order for them to make a massive change of this scale. And for that now to be reversed just throws the entire sector into complete fucking disarray. The amount of change that some of these institutions were looking at, for example, this is an article I can post in the show notes as well, talked about swings of like 20% in terms of their international student enrollment. So Monash University, for example, their new overseas commencements in 2023 were 8,300 and their new cap for 2025 would be 10,000. 20% more swing in terms of what they could take in under this new regime. Murdoch University, 5,200 and something students in 2023, international students. Their new cap in 2025 was 3,500. So that's a 33.6% fewer international students that they are now allowed to admit to their university. They've got to hire teachers. They've got to put together cohorts. They've got to plan for space. You can't just say to a massive institutions like universities, like
spin it up, just spin up another server, she'll be right.
Exactly. It's not a fucking Google Cloud instance, mate. Like these are people's job. People have been hired now to address these cohorts of students that are coming through or are meant to be coming through. And now nobody knows what the fuck's going to happen with any of this.
As someone who had the great pleasure of experiencing Monash's student admin about 15 years ago, when, things had been stable for a relatively reasonable amount of time, it wasn't great then. I can't imagine it's gotten heaps better. And for any of those students that are now going to be rocking up on, a week or whatever else, and now have to go see the student, admin office or something and be like, I need to pick my subjects. And they're going to be like, we don't know what subjects we're doing.
You don't go here. Well, what do you mean? You don't go here anymore. The government decided. When did they decide? Don't know. Don't really know.
They rushed it through a week before Christmas.
Yeah. And that's a pretty like sanguine appraisal of what's happened when, people like Independent Senator David Pocock also called for a slew of amendments to the bill, including that the start date for the caps be pushed back to 2026, seems reasonable given the time constraints, that the ministerial powers be retired after a maximum of 2 years, so basically ministerial discretion to like do whatever they want with regard to international student enrollments, which is not great, and the removal of power to set course level caps. This is what they were initially proposing, is that the government wants to go through course by course at each university and set caps. Say, if you're studying cybersecurity at this university, you can only have this many places for this course at this university. It completely neuters the ability of the universities to plan for themselves and would be a massive overreach of government power to take on the responsibility for deciding who goes to what courses at which universities. Like, it's particularly
for international students. Like, I mean, they kind of do that already for domestic students with the Commonwealth supported places. They go, well, we're going to fund.
But if you're getting money, that's different. If you're getting money from the government, then they get a say in where that money goes and how. Like, I don't like it, but that is the case. That is how the funding model works currently. These are international students who are paying their own way. Like, frankly, and they're paying a lot of fucking money in order to come and study in Australia. So if you want a a university sector that is tailored to serving domestic students and nothing else, then I'll tell you what,
funding.
You have to increase your funding a fuckload, because this is the way that universities make their bread and butter, is they make the money, they make the margins on the international students, and that's what funds the rest of the university, because they can only charge so much, right? So, and David Pocock said, quote, "This bill is a blunt instrument with poorly drafted policies put together on the run for political reasons," unquote. Like, that says it all. Like, do you know David Pocock's got no allegiances to anyone in this? He's got no dogs in this fight, right? So he is perfectly willing to say it how it is. And if someone who's in Parliament looking at the proposed legislation is saying that, who is the only person who doesn't have a vested interest, then he's probably telling the truth, right?
Yeah, and this potentially, like, I know I'm probably oversimplifying it, but these kinds of, like, giving them that sort of power to be able to dictate how many student caps apply per course per uni, almost like it's like they're incentivizing, hey, donate to our party, because then they can always do their whole, they're a big donor of ours, we'll give them a higher cap than somewhere else, right?
We decide exactly how much money you get in which course, because different courses have different margins and different money comes in for different courses. Like, you are severely throttling the ability of a university to make money if you are doing that, right?
Yeah.
It's just I can't say I'm like overly disappointed to see that legislation go down in a ball of flames, but we're still stuck with Ministerial Direction 107. That's the thing, is like the current state of play where the government, gets to allocate visas based on the university institutions that they prefer. All of that stuff is still kind of in place. And if anything, like, that disadvantages smaller players, these people who are not, the premier institutions that people want to go to, the S tier level unis that, people will fight their way to come over to go see. Like, if you're a rural university, you might not be a shonky provider, but now you've lost all of your international students, right? And because you're not like one of these high quality institutions that people are, crawling through glass to get to. So therefore you're not getting approved visas to, it's just bad. It's bad policy. It's bad policy. They've tried to jam it through at the last minute. And like, the turnaround time was just not sensible. You just have to wonder, like, what is the Labor, like, you guys want to win the next election? Like, what are you doing? What are you focusing on? It's the social media stuff. If I had to tell you what the Labor Party right now stands for, right before the next election, I couldn't fucking tell you. Like, I really have no clue. Something about stage 3 tax cuts, maybe a little bit about electricity, cuts to electricity bills, some cost of living relief. Is it enough to make me bound over to the polls on election day in order to pull the lever for them? No, not particularly, but like, the other side is worse, so I guess that's what they're counting on. So I don't know.
I wonder if there's some modeling. There must be some sort of modeling their views, which is like, well, if we increase the amount of, if we decrease the amount of students in rural areas, that means we alleviate the housing crisis out there. And if we increase the number of students in, say, the Melbourne CBD,
but that's where the housing crisis is. There isn't a housing
Melbourne
crisis.
City Council does very well out of it.
In rural Victoria, there isn't a housing crisis like there is in inner city Melbourne and Sydney, right? Like,
no. There is actually a massive rural.
Yeah.
Well, it's bad everywhere. It's bad everywhere, is my point.
It's bad.
It's different, but it's bad still. Yeah.
It seems like particularly reckless of Labor to be pursuing this part. And, like, to the extent to which, they talked about how, one of their plans was to alleviate a portion of people's HECS debts. I think we talked about that last week. Part of their student debts, 20% of your student debt would get wiped out under the next Labor administration. Like, I'm so concerned about their trajectory that I actually don't know. Like, I'm in a position where I could borrow some money and pay it down, my help debt, in order to free up some more cash flow on a day-to-day basis. And there's a possibility that I might miss out on like getting 20% of my HECS debt paid down. And I'm still thinking I might do it because A, I don't think they're going to win. And B, if they do win in a minority government capacity, Labor, like, I don't think that they'll have the juice to get it through Parliament with an unfriendly crossbench. Like, I just don't see.
Are you giving in to the Liberals' minority government propaganda line there?
I personally would love a minority Labor government because it means they would get dragged to the left on a bunch of these issues, which I would personally prefer.
Depends what the crossbench is like. Like if we suddenly
if it's a crossbench with Pauline Hanson
stacked with Pauline Hanson, Bob Catter, and a bunch of others, no.
Let 1,000 flowers bloom. But I'm not worried about it because every 6 seconds a crocodile. So I like that is definitely a possibility. The far more likely possibility I think is that it would be a Labor Greens coalition if it were to be a minority government. But even then, like I'm not convinced that they'd be able to get that piece of legislation past the crossbench through, signed through the government. Even the indexation,
not in a timely order. Not in a timely
in order to get my HEX debt, 20% of it wiped out before whatever 30 Jan next year, like they're promising. Like I just don't see it, right? And I need that extra cash flow now because cost of living is fucking killing me. So, I just don't buy it. I don't buy that they can do it. So, at the risk of like potentially losing out on like $5,000, I think I'm still probably thinking that I'm going to pay it down because I just don't have the confidence in the Labor government to get this done. The indexation freeze that they promised and like agreed on, there's been no substantial disagreement about whether that's going to happen. Bringing the indexation rate for the 2023 year down from 7.1% to like maxing out at like 3 or 4%, something like that, which would save your average HEX debt holder something like $2,000, right? Somewhere around there. That legislation is stalled. It's still in the Senate. It hasn't passed. They talked about that months ago. Like it's already done. It's done and dusted. It's happened, baby. Don't worry about it. No, it's still in the Senate for review. It's had a first reading. It's had a second reading. Because I looked it up. I was like, last week, I was like, what the fuck happened to that piece of legislation? Did that go through? I'm not seeing this in my help debt report, any kind of reduction in my indexation. It still hasn't even passed the fucking Senate. It's still not law. So they promised this, a year ago, 6 months ago, whenever it was. It still hasn't gone through, and they're in charge. They are currently in charge, and they could do this, but for some reason it's still sitting on the back burner. Like, do you guys want to win? This is very frustrating to me.
Yeah, that is wild, because I know the indexation doesn't kick in until, like, the financial year ends. Like, they total it at tax time. So maybe that's why they thought they had time, but it's like, but if you fucking don't get this passed before the election, what's Dutton gonna do?
I mean, they said there's no one that's got like, any in principle objections to it. It's just like making its way through the Senate. I'm like, well, can it make its way a little bit fucking faster? Because I'm drowning here.
Can you like at least like just make sure we don't have to keep worrying about it?
Yeah, and they get indexed again next year based on the previous amount, which has been over-indexed from the year before. You know what I mean? Like pay interest on that additional interest that, it's at a certain point, it becomes like very complicated to work out because you've got a compounding interest problem, right? If you're doing 3% on this year's amount, as opposed to 3% on what it should have been once the indexation was capped, then you're looking at two very different amounts, right? Because you've got that compound growth. And the longer it goes on, the harder it's going to be to like wind all of this stuff back, right? The guys are doing math.
With our hands, in an audio medium.
I had 3% on one side and then 3% on the other, and then that somehow became 2%.
Okay, so
I don't know quite how that. Yeah, I'm fucking with you. Anyway,
our last story.
Speaking of cost of living,
I was going to say, George, maybe the big solution to your problem would just be a really convenient insurance payout. If suddenly, I don't know, if something really horrible happened to your car, like I don't know, a bear attacked it,
and then
you had to get a great insurance payout, then all your money problems would be solved. That's what some people, I don't know if it was for money problems, like I don't really know here, but some people in America, four Californians, they recently made a claim.
This is why Trump won.
Yeah, that's why Trump won.
This is why too much wokeism and fake bears. That's what it was.
You
and the Latinos.
You ruined it. You ruined it. Some Californians had claimed about $200,000 in insurance damage to their luxury cars, saying that a bear had ruined, their 2 Mercedes-Benz, a Rolls-Royce, and they were parked out in the mountains about 100 kilometers east of Los Angeles, and said a bear had roughed up their luxury cars. In investigating the claim, agents thought that the bear moved particularly strangely in the footage. We've got some of the footage.
No, this is obviously just for the YouTube.
For the YouTube people, if you want to have a look, but we can describe it a little bit.
Have you seen the footage? Have either of you guys actually seen this?
I've seen the photos of the photos, but not the actual video. No.
So this is obviously it's like a kind of like a ring cam. Like a ring cam or something like that. I don't know who's got a Rolls Royce and is just parking it in their driveway. Like surely you'd pop it in the garage, I think. So there's some footage here that we're gonna watch of what is definitely not a bear climbing gingerly into this car's front seat. So if we're here, we see the car door.
Bear opens the door.
Opens. He opens it with his opposable thumbs. And it sort of crawls in. He's like on his front legs. And he's kind of in there looking at the dashboard. Obviously, he seems to know what a dashboard is, and he's just kind of like pouring it gently. It's
just like swatting at things. So swatting at it. You see these faint in the pictures that they've got here. Some faint, like
very faint little scratches on the upholstery.
Scratch lines with some very ginger like indents. It looks like the bear didn't really damage the car.
Didn't really do that much damage.
Not the kind of damage I'd expect from a bear entering my car.
Yeah,
right?
like a 300 kilo bear in your backseat.
Yeah.
Now you'll notice that all of those scratches had 6 points.
Yeah, that was the point. Hang on, just let me get there. A biologist who was reviewing the footage concluded it was, quote, clearly a human in a bear suit, which I think is just a fantastic quote to get from the California Department of Insurance. And then there was a search of the home of one of the people who made the claim. And in that home, they found a bear suit and a pair of meat shredding claws. And as George was just pointing out there, the meat shredding claws have 6 prongs. And the biologist was able to point out that bears have 5 toes. So that's too many claw marks to be putting in were it a bear. And I think they also went through the phone of one of the people involved and found photos of the bear costume. And just being like, this is the bear costume. We did it, fam.
I was saying, George, before the show, we want to see the short film or TV series of how they cook this up. There's the kitchen, be a fly on the wall in the kitchen of the
maybe over some pulled pork. Maybe that's how it happened. The guy had his kitchen mama cooking implements. He was shredding some pork, and he thought, wouldn't it be great if we use this for insurance fraud? That is a 20-minute Quentin Tarantino scene that I would fully be seated to watch.
Yeah.
I would absolutely watch this movie.
It's pretty wild as well, because I guess I don't know, what's the end goal there? It's like you want to get the insurance claim to get the money. But then it's only a benefit for you to get the money if you also have your working luxury car. Because otherwise you've lost the luxury car and you've got the money. That's how the insurance works.
Well, this is why it was just upholstery.
Enough.
Yes, exactly. This is why it was largely upholstery-based damage, because then they could presumably go to a mate and get it fixed up on the cheap. They turn around and ping the insurance for a replacement of the whole fucking car seat or something like that. And then they pocket the difference, right?
Yeah, because it's just so I'm
not explaining how, I'm not trying to give guidance on how to do insurance fraud. This is illegal, don't do it.
Yeah, that seems like that seems like maybe the end goal, which makes me think.
But he didn't take a baseball bat to the front of the car and punch holes through all the paneling and stuff. They didn't really do any extensive damage, right? He's trying to.
Bear is the wrong choice, because a bear getting stuck in your car will shred the thing.
So bears breaking into homes or trash cans in search of food have become more of a problem in California over the last couple of years, from Lake Tahoe in the Sierra down to the foothill suburbs of Los Angeles, where some have been known to raid refrigerators and take dips in backyard pools and hot tubs. Very different to gingerly opening a car door with their opposable thumbs, getting in, and then kind of lightly scratching the upholstery. That's not the sort of thing that bears do. So.
I would imagine more if a bear fucked up a car, it would be the outside, pawing at it, maybe just, I don't know, bear doing what bear does, or like climbing on top of it and the weight of the bear like buckling something, or like I think hopping inside just to kind of fuck up the seats a little bit and then to hop out.
Yeah, just like Matt Gaetz, it was barely legal. On that note, we have been, we are, and we always will be Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com. Make sure you follow us on all the bullshit social medias that have, do, or ever will exist at our handle at Unnatural Show. Make sure you follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Blue Sky at George Tsipos.
I don't like what you said. You can follow me on Twitter at Tom D. Heath.
And you can follow me down to Facebook Marketplace because I hear there is a stellar-looking bear costume up for sale. So we'll be.
What's the international shipping on that?
I don't know. Worth it. Whatever it is, worth it.
And Luke, I'll take my apology in written or in audiogram form.
Or just get George the bear costume and.
That's you know what I'll accept that as a peace offering. Luke, if you buy me that bear costume, I'll forgive you.
But I want the bear costume.
Well, you should have gotten a conservative to wrong you in 2018.
You get it. Okay, you get it. Monday through Wednesday, George Thursday through Saturday, and alternating Sundays.
That seems fair and just.
But I really want to take the bear costume to soccer practice on Saturday morning.
Thanks for listening, guys. Love your faces. We'll see you next week.